Thank you very much for having me. I am honored to be here. I love that there's a conference that you put on together for each other and that you all come together to learn and celebrate and grow. So thank you for having me. Let me just start off with that. So the world's a big place. And as a society, at least in America, we put a lot of pressure on people to do certain things and say certain things. But as humans, I think naturally we want to try a lot of different things. So some of the things you may be told you should do, right? Like that you should do. You should go to college. You should buy a house. You should get a job. That last one we can debate. But what if you want to move around? What if you want to live in a lot of places? What if you want to try a lot of things? What if you're an engineer or a product manager and you want to become a leader? What if you're an engineer and you want to become a designer? How do you do those things? So today I'm going to teach you, not teach you, this feels very lecture-ish, although you're all looking down on me. Today I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to share 3 lessons I've learned over my career. So for the past decade or two, I've moved seamlessly between the worlds of entertainment, professional sports, government, technology, but the common thread has always been humans. It's always been the people. So hopefully you learn a little today. I'm going to be staying through lunch. I'd love to meet as many of you as possible, so please say hi on the breaks, please say hi at lunch. But let's go ahead and dive into it. Does that sound good? Awesome. So here's a synopsis of my life. My life is a series of moments where I'm sneaking up to the big kids table, trying not to be noticed. I'm trying to be in the background. I'm trying to not be the person in charge. I don't want any, spotlight on me. So this is a picture of me with my grandfather. I was probably 3 years old. Obviously, my pants are amazing. Way ahead of my time. But, I always enjoy being the person who is in the background making everything happen. So I'd like to start off by giving a big round of applause to your organizers today. And I know all the work they did in the background, so let's give them a big round of applause. That's my comfortable spot. That's my area of good is being the person who puts all the work in and then lets other people shine. But the thing about sneaking up to big kids' tables is, at some point, if you sneak up to enough of them, they become really big tables. So I've worked at Intuit on a product called TurboTax. It's a tax preparation software for your income taxes. I've been involved with TEDx for about 8 years now. First started off directing them and then producing them. I worked on the Oscars at one point, on the Super Bowl, which is the football that isn't the right football, which is obviously soccer. And most recently, I was at the White House working in the Obama administration on 2 different occasions. And the thing is, I never set out to have a career in tech software. In fact, I was supposed to be a high school English teacher. So how did a kid from New Jersey with a bachelor's degree in English and theater, of all things, end up in each of those places? How did somebody who was supposed to be a high school English teacher end up at the White House? I'm going to pause for a minute. Some of you might know a show on MTV called Jersey Shore. I am from New Jersey. None of these people who were on that show are actually from New Jersey. So if you walk away with nothing else today from my talk, hopefully it's knowing that New Jersey has normal, cool, nice people in it. So how did I get to all those places? It's because of my mom. It's because of her. It never occurred to me that I couldn't do or be anything I set my mind to. Now, I put the little arrow that says little Kara because when I've shown people this picture before, they're like, oh, wow, your hair used to be brown. And I'm like, no, that's my mom. We just are carbon copies of each other. So I say this to you because the idea of trying anything was instilled in me at an early age. And that, truly, the lessons I'm going to talk about today are going to give you some insight, but it really is because of her that I just kept trying things and doing things. So what are the 3 lessons? Here's your preview. Always say yes, connect the dots, and make your own opportunities. Now, I'll tell you a story of how I first got into technology. I had graduated from university, and I was a national instructor for a computer retail store. It was called CompUSA. It's now out of business, so I can totally talk smack about them and not get sued. Okay, that was going to be a laugh line. It's cool. We're good. So the cool thing about the job was, because it was a national store, basically at 23, they paid for me to travel around the country and train people on this mainframe, on this ugly green screen. And what that meant was they didn't care where I lived, because they would fly me to places like Fresno and New Orleans, which was great. So I figured, well, I don't need to live in New Jersey anymore. I can go to California and try that. This is pretty much what I see every night at the end of my block. I walk down, there's a beautiful sunset. It is ridiculously obnoxious how beautiful Mother Nature can be. And so I moved to San Diego. I had a great job. I was traveling around the country. Life was good. So I moved 3,000 miles. How many kilometers is that? A lot. It's a lot. So I moved 3,000 miles away from home. And 3 days after I got there, they laid me off. Now, I told the HR person very nicely that I was sure they were a human being. But if they had a heart, they would have told me 6 weeks prior, when I told them I was going to move 3,000 miles, that I might want to wait. I said, you could have told me that, hey, you might want to not uproot your life and move. Because at that point, I had $600 in my bank account. And rent was due in 2 weeks. That wasn't the best situation. So I called my father and my mother. And my father, with all good intent, said, well, the worst that can happen, Kara, is you move back to New Jersey and move in with us. Yeah, Dad, that's actually the worst thing that could happen. You are completely correct. So what I did was I picked up the Yellow Pages, which is it's our version of the phone book. It's about this thick. They leave it on your doorstep. And actually, most people don't bring it into the house, so you get 3 or 4 of them stacked up. But so it lists all the businesses. And I went to the section on publications, because I figured with a degree in English, I could go work for McGraw-Hill or some publication house. I had a degree in English. I'd never done that before, but sure, I could write or do something. And nobody was hiring. I called 3 or 4 places in San Diego, no one was hiring. And the next section in the phone book was public relations, because it's alphabetical. And I thought, well, I can talk a dog off a chuck wagon. I've never done PR, but sure, I'll try it. Why not? I'll try anything. So the first place I called said, we decided just today to add a senior PR account manager. Do you want to come in for an interview? Of course. Yes, I'll come in. I went in, I got the interview, I got the job. Why, thank you. So I called my dad and I was like, good, we've avoided the worst case scenario, Dad. I'm not moving home. So I did that for a couple years. But it was such a key learning point in my life, because here I was faced with this situation where things could have gone very bad, very quickly. And this is a comic by a guy on Twitter called Johnny Sun. If you don't follow him, you should. He's an MIT PhD student who is studying the use of language in social media. And when I was creating this talk, I found this tweet. And the reason I love it is because at that point in time when I was laid off, and the 36 hours between getting laid off and getting a job was honestly one of the worst times of my life. And I feel like this talk, this tweet, he's talking to me. He's saying, look, life's bad. Everyone's sad. We're all gonna die. But I already bought this inflatable bouncy castle, so you're gonna take off your shoes or what? So when things kind of go sideways in your life or something's bad, like this is a really good reframing. And so in that scenario of getting laid off and getting another job, I took off my shoes. I jumped into the bouncy house. And that's the first lesson. Always say yes. I had no business working in PR. I had no business taking that job. I had no experience. But they liked me, and they thought I could do it. So I said yes. Now, this was 1999. I actually moved to San Diego in the middle of Women's World Cup. I grew up playing soccer. I coached it. Soccer was my life for the better part of 25 years. And when I heard we were getting it in the United States, I went to the website, and there was a form to sign up for volunteers. And I went with my old soccer coach from when I was a kid, and I signed up. And they picked us. So we were at the opening ceremonies at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. And it was a magical moment to be there during the opening ceremonies, seeing the US women's team march out. And there I am next to my mentor, my second father, my soccer coach. In the middle of it, I moved to San Diego. You've already heard the story. I got laid off. And so when I got the job, I said, well, you know what? I don't want to start right away, because in the middle of moving, what had happened was, one by one, the women started winning, and they started winning more. And then they got to the final at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. So I called the press chief, and I said, Tim, I'm now in California. You probably need help at the Rose Bowl, don't you? Because I was on the press operations team. He said, of course, come up. So I was in the Rose Bowl with 90,000 other people when Brandi Chastain kicked the winning penalty kick to propel the women to the gold over the China team. Because I had said yes to an opportunity to volunteer. So fast forward a couple years, and after the World Cup, they started a women's league in the States. Now, it folded after a few years, but when we had it, it was good, and I was community relations manager, and yes, I wore the panda costume once. It's very hot in there. So if you ever go to a theme park and you see somebody dressed up as Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse, know that it is not a glamorous job. You might think it's a glamorous job. It's not a glamorous job. So the Super Bowl was coming to San Diego. Another volunteer opportunity. I reached out. I said, I'll do whatever you need to do. Let me know. And so they interviewed me. They brought me onto the Super Bowl team, the host committee team. And they wanted me to run the press operations center because I had done that for the World Cup. Now, fast forward a couple weeks, security, there was a lot going on. 9/11 had happened at that point. And they said, we want to bring in the big guns to run the press operations center. So I was out of a gig. Volunteer big gig, albeit, but I was out of a gig. And I was disappointed because I was really excited about working on it, but, you know, things happen. There's a bouncy house. I'm going to go jump in it. Fast forward a couple weeks, and they said, you know, we need somebody to be the production coordinator for the halftime show. Are you interested? Always say yes. So I said yes. So I became the production coordinator for the Super Bowl halftime show. That year we had, no doubt, Shania Twain and Sting. And the production team that came down from LA was called 10th Planet. So I was their liaison. I was in charge of 80 volunteers. Our job was to get the equipment, the band, and everything on and off the field in 90 seconds. Okay. Yes, we can. And I had a really good relationship with the team from LA, and they said, you know, we really like your how. You're organized, you're respectful, you get stuff done. If you're ever in LA, let us know. We'd love to work with you. And I said, you know, funny you should say that. I'm actually moving to LA in 3 weeks because I had this thing. The reason I moved to San Diego in the first place was because I wanted to try the West Coast before I was 30. I don't know why. There's something, I guess, where like 30 is a magic age in the US. And then I had this thing, well, I want to try entertainment before I'm 30, so I'm going to move to LA. I don't know what I'm going to do when I'm up there, but I'll find something. I always do. So the production team said, oh, you're moving there in 3 weeks. Do you want to work on our next gig with us? I said, sure, yes. So they gave me the phone on the spot. We're standing outside Qualcomm Stadium where the Super Bowl is going to be. It's our final dress rehearsal. They give me the phone. I do an interview. I get off the phone. I give it back to the woman, to Marge, and I said, well, that's cool. She said, I have a gig. But she didn't say what it was. I said, what's your next gig in 3 weeks that I'm going to work with you on? Oh, it's the Oscars? Awesome. That's great. So that was my first gig in LA, was the Oscars. And again, if you look at the through line, if you look at this lesson of always say yes, those were volunteer gigs that got me a paid gig, right? So always say yes isn't just about what you do in your day-to-day work. It's about what do you do outside of work. And the ultimate place that always say yes got me to was the White House. So I saw a tweet 5 years ago in May of 2012 from a gentleman named Todd Park. He was the US Chief Technology Officer at the White House. And the tweet said they were looking for a few good women and men to serve their country in the first class of Presidential Innovation Fellows. I applied. It was very similar. I clicked through. I looked at the website. It was very similar to what I was doing at Intuit at the time. And out of 786 applicants, they picked 18 of us. Of those 18, 2 women. And that was the job where our charter was to reimagine the relationship between the government and the people from a technology perspective. At the end of the fellowship, as you can imagine, it was very exciting. It was very much an honor and privilege to be able to do the job. We sat in the White House briefing President Obama on our 5 projects. I happened to be sitting next to him. Not because of always say yes, you actually get assigned seating when you meet with the president. And at the end of the meeting, President Obama tapped my arm and he said, "Do you want to go into the Oval? Should we get a picture?" What do you think my answer was? Yes. Yes, sir, actually, was the answer. So while always say yes has served me well, it doesn't mean that that comes easy. Because sometimes you need to connect the dots for people. So that's the second lesson, is connect the dots. The problem, at least I found, I mean, nod your head or raise your hand if you find it to be similar. It's really hard to break out of a mold or a shell once somebody decides you're the person who's good at something. Has anybody ever felt that way? It's kind of hard. Yeah, I'm seeing nodding and hands. So at this point in my career, I was known for 2 things: big events and something called instructional design. And instructional design is a career where you create the tools that companies use to train their employees. So I was trying to move from instructional design into technical writing. And when I interviewed at TurboTax, I remember sitting with the hiring manager, the woman who would become my boss, and she's like, "I don't see it. I don't see how an instructional designer will be a good tech writer." So I had to connect the dots for her. And so I said, well, as an instructional designer, I have to do an audience analysis. I have to know who I'm creating for. As a tech writer, you have to know who your audience is that you're writing for. And I said, you need to talk to them about what's important to them. You have to speak to them in a language that makes sense to them, in a way that makes sense to them, on the right channel that makes sense to them. So I ended up getting the job, fast forward, spoiler alert. But it was on me. So if you're in a position where you're like, I want to get this role, or I want to get into this industry or this career, you've got to do the legwork. You can't expect somebody to see how amazing you are. Because Jan, obviously you are very amazing, or you wouldn't be sitting in the front row. Thank you so much. I met some people yesterday. Case introduced me on the street to a number of you, randomly on the way to dinner. So hi to all of you I met yesterday on the street. But also a few folks last night at dinner, and I was like, please sit in the front row so I see familiar faces who I know already and love. So yeah, I mean, in your career, I'm sure you've had to connect the dots for people, and you have to do some of the legwork. So this is the part where our good friend Beth said you need your pen and your paper. This is an exercise I do with people when they're either looking to do a career change, or they're happy at the company they're at, but they want to take a different role, or they want to move on to a different team. So I want you to take your paper, please. This is optional. I'm not going to make sure everyone's doing it. But it's an exercise I do with people. You're going to make a T, so draw a T on your paper. And in the left column, I want you to write good at. And in the right column, I want you to write passionate about. And then in that little lower right-hand side, let's carve out a little space for what do you really hate doing? Like, what do you really hate? And you have to be honest with yourself. You're not going to share this with your manager or your spouse or your kids. This is for you. But your dog can eat it afterwards. That's okay. So what does it mean when I ask, what are you good at? this is what you're known for. This is what you're the go-to person for, right? This is Christian. Everyone knows to come to Christian if you need something done really well in Excel. Am I even close to correct? No? Okay, we're good. Another bonus to sit in the front row. I can read your name tags. And so the reason we do this exercise is because I found, at least, and a lot of people I talk to when I'm doing coaching is, if you become really good at something, everybody comes to you for it. But you might not care about doing that anymore, right? So take a minute and try to write down 2 things you are good at. What are the 2 things that everybody comes to you for? If you want to do a bonus third one, make the third one not about work. So just take a minute and write down those 3 things. Oh, are you not participating, sir? Just because you organized the whole conference? All right, so you're all laughing. That means you're done writing. All right, let's do passionate about. Same thing, 2 things. What do you just like, what drives you? What is your happy spot? What are you passionate about doing? Again, try 2 at work and then bonus 1 not at work. And then if you're kind of struggling, what the heck is Kara talking about? Here's some things for me. I'm good at writing. I'm good at editing. I'm really good at strategy, especially end-to-end strategy for UX. Good at giving advice, UX. I'm kind of known for creating safe spaces for people to grow and do great work. Now, what I'm passionate about is experience design, especially putting on shows and live events. But my happiest place in the entire world is when I'm building the first draft of a show rundown. And a show rundown, this comes from the Oscars and the Emmys and other things I worked on, that is the minute to minute and actually second to second, cue by cue. So it would say, for today's event, doors open at 9 a.m., music starts at 9:03, 9:07, MC comes on stage. Video plays from 9:07 to 9:09. And the first time I get that, which is basically the agenda from the executive producer, and I sit down and I get my Excel sheet and I get my laptop, I get to take that vision and build it into this really dorky second-by-second rundown. That's my passion. The things I hate doing, I am allergic to meetings. More setting them up than attending. So if you told me I had to find a day where 500 people would be able to come from 9 to 5 into an auditorium and I had to fix it with all of your schedules, I would really not be happy with life. So hopefully you have a couple things written down. I encourage you to do this more. If you're interested in doing this exercise, when you get home, think about it more. Because then the final thing you do, and I encourage you, don't do this like on your computer. Don't make a spreadsheet in Excel. Like there's a power psychologically in writing it down and writing it out. Look for patterns. Because now, like writing and editing, that's about communications. Strategy and solving hard, big, meaty problems, that's puzzles. Give me a good puzzle to dig into at work. And then the safe spaces and working on shit that really matters, that's about humans. That's about people. So after you fill out both columns, look for patterns across both of them, put a circle around it, and call that pattern something. Because if you want to move careers, if you want to move up into a leadership position, if you want to move on to a different team, these are now the 3 things you should be looking for in those jobs. That's how I ended up getting where I got in my career, was being self-aware enough to know what my strengths were and what I'm passionate about, and finding opportunities that fit those. Now, I'll tell you, as a hiring manager, and this was a big one for me, I'd rather take somebody, let's say UX. I'd rather take somebody that's 5 out of 10 good at UX, but 10 out of 10 passionate about it, than somebody who's 10 out of 10 good at UX and only 5 out of 10 passionate about it. Because I can teach you the skills you need. I can send you to conferences, send you to classes, and make you a better UXer. But if you don't give a crap about it, I can't make you more passionate. So think about those things. Think about how you want to grow, where you want to grow, and ask yourself some hard questions about what those things are that drive you. So the last one is make your own opportunities. Now, I got into UX because when I started at a really big insurance company, about mid-career, I was an instructional designer, and I found out there was this team called New Media. And that was, it kind of went like new media, then they were called usability, now it's called UX. That's been kind of the evolution and the maturation of the user experience design discipline. And these people were doing their first e-learning module, and they needed somebody to write the script. And I said, I just came from Hollywood, where I did a lot of script coverage. Do you want some help writing the script? And they said, yes, who are you, you magical unicorn? I said, I'm Kara, nice to meet you. And I found out that their job was to test products before they go live. And their job was to talk to people who used these products to make sure the products weren't broken and it could be used. I was like, wait, your job is to be the voice of the user? Like, how do I get on this gig? So I walked into my boss's office and I said, Bill, I want to do 25% of my job doing UX, 75% instructional design. I'm really passionate about it, the idea of being the voice of the user and sitting at the table with marketing and product and security and everybody else and being that ambassador, being the ambassador of their voice is really exciting to me. And he said, sure. Okay. I made my own opportunity. I walked in. There's more examples of that I don't know the Klarna culture intimately well, but at Intuit, we had this thing called 10% time, where you could work on anything you wanted, 10%, 4 hours a week, 16 hours a month. Show of hands, has anybody ever watched a TED Talk? Okay, let's try that again. Show of hands, has anybody never watched a TED Talk? Okay, I'll talk to you at lunch, sir. What's your name? Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming today. Didn't mean to ostracize you in front of your whole company. We all have a lot to share with you. Because the truth is, everyone has a favorite TED Talk. My two favorite are Brian Stevenson, We Need to Talk About an Injustice, and my second favorite is the LXD. And LXD is this beautiful dance company that, when you think about dance, you might think about ballroom or salsa or polka. I'm half Irish and half Polish. And what these people do is just mind-bending and mind-blowing. So I encourage you, if you haven't watched a TED Talk, or if you have and you want two new ones, watch the LXDs and watch Brian Stevenson's. So I'd been watching TED Talks since about 2006 when they came out, and they started publishing them online. And they started this new program called TEDx, where anybody around the world could apply for a license to put on a TED-like conference in their community, at work. And I found we were getting one in San Diego. So what was that first lesson? What do you think I said when I found out we were getting one in San Diego? Yes. So I went to the website, and I filled out the volunteer form, and I said, I will be your janitor. I don't care. I just want to be involved. And by the way, if you think it would help, I've also worked on the Oscars and the Emmys. Let me know. 5 minutes later, the organizer called me, and he said, will you direct our show? Yes. Yes, I will. And that's how I got involved. And I loved the experience so much that the day after the first TEDx San Diego in 2010, I went to the website on TED.com and I applied for my own license at Intuit. And I started TEDx Intuit. And I executive produced that for 5 years using my 10% time. Now the key thing there, right, because this is the whole lesson around make your own opportunities, neither one of those gigs was paid. They were volunteer. But they were huge leadership positions, right? And the thing to remember about being a leader is not a title. A leader is a frame of mind. So whether or not your title has manager in it, or lead, or supervisor, or vice president, or chief whatever officer, there's opportunities to lead, and you need to do what you do best as engineers and product managers. You need to hack the system. So are there things at work where when somebody says we need somebody to lead a project, or we need somebody to take charge of this initiative, those are leadership opportunities you say yes to. There's also things that you have to remember that I learned early in my career is there might be times, whether it's TEDx San Diego or the World Cup or the Super Bowl, is you gotta be willing to do the grunt work, the non-glamorous work, the making the photocopies, the making the coffee. None of us are above that. I've done it. The key is paying attention. What are you photocopying? Who are you making coffee for? What meeting are you asked to take notes in, right? But there's also opportunities outside of work to get experience to put on your resume. Is there a local high school that needs somebody to come in and help teach kids how to code? Is there a local nonprofit that could use an engineer to come in and fix some of their back-end stuff or their databases? So looking for leadership opportunities outside of your day-to-day work. If you're just waiting for somebody to say, you know what, is there a Tim in the room? I'm just gonna say Tim. Tim, you would make a great boss. The likelihood of that happening probably isn't high, but you proactively going out and looking for opportunities to shine and to be a leader, a little higher. Or maybe Klarna is, maybe you do come every day, like maybe 3 of you are gonna become a manager today, I don't know. No, yeah, okay. We were joking last night at dinner, Case is like, if everyone goes in and asks for a promotion based off your talk, I'm like, that's not the point of my talk. It'd be kind of cool if a couple people did. So yeah, I mean, the key thing with the make your own opportunities, and I think you get the point, is think beyond just work. Think beyond just your job. What are ways that you can hack the system to make those opportunities, whether it's in work, in your community, wherever you show up every day. So how did a kid from Jersey with a bachelor's degree in English and theater end up in each of these places? I used to tell people, it's because I'm lucky. I'm half Irish. I got to each and every one of those places because I was lucky. And then about 4 years ago, my friend Danny looked at me and said, you need to stop that. You need to stop telling people you're lucky. Because every time you say you're lucky, and that's why you got those jobs, you're telling every woman, every guy, and every kid that looks up to you that no matter how hard they work, they will not achieve what you've achieved. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, everybody. So I stopped saying I was lucky, because I know I worked hard. I worked really hard. And I put this same amount of effort into a paid job as I did a volunteer position. So now I tell people, this is how you get where I get to, been to, am. Always say yes. Connect the dots and make your own opportunities. Now, one of my unofficial mantras is also help each other shine. So in the spirit of giving credit, Johnny's son, thank you to him for being kind enough to let me use his cartoon in today's talk. If you don't follow him on Twitter, he's hysterical, and his new book is lovely, and you should all go read it. And my friend Libby Torbeck is a hand letterer and an artist. And I said, I'm giving this really cool talk in Sweden. Would you mind hand lettering my 3 lessons? And of course she said yes, because she kind of follows that always say yes thing too. So if you'd like to visit her, her shop is on Etsy. It's Libby Doodle. And thank you to all of you.